Hi everyone, I'm Keith Mathis with the Mathis Group. Today we're going to be talking about Scrum. And so in this webinar, it's entitled Getting More Done with Less. Now, many of you maybe have not heard of Scrum or experienced any time working with Scrum, but Scrum is the most popular Agile methodology there is. Scrum is based on values, and the values guide decision-making, provide clarity in times of ambiguity, and communicate why Agile teams do what they do. So Scrum is a very fast-paced type of structure that allows people to be able to, in a changing environment, to be able to produce features and functionality and get it to the customer at a very quick rate. Now, there's many approaches to Agile. One of those is going to be lean, as you see here, but notice in the blue under the Agile topic there's many different types and flavors of Agile. And so you've got Crystal, Kanban, XP, but you'll notice Scrum is one of those approaches. Now in traditional Scrum, you'll notice also that you have a product backlog. So let's use this slide to lay some foundation for you so you'll understand exactly what's going to be taking place here. Anytime you see the word backlog, that stands for master list. And so this is a product backlog. This is a master list of the features for this product and for this project. You'll notice you have a sprint scope. That is going to be your sprint backlog, is sometimes what that's called, but that is going to be those features that are going to be produced in the next iteration or sprint. You'll notice your sprint is 1 to 4 weeks long. In Scrum, you have sprints that are 4 weeks or less in length. You have no change orders in those. During those 4 weeks, you will have a daily stand-up meeting each morning for 15 minutes in which you will talk about what you finished yesterday, what you're working on today, and naming any type of impediments that you have that are giving you problems in the project. And then you're going to have a releasable product, or to put it more correctly, a portion of a releasable product that you're giving to the customer for feedback. Now, to make you understand and help you understand what the release is, each sprint, you're handing off a piece of that product, okay, with certain features and functionality to the customer. They're going to start using it and giving you feedback. After so many sprints or iterations, you're going to have what would be called a release. Now, your development team is producing these in piecemeal, but that is what you're doing, is producing a usable product. Product goals and backlog. Now in product goals and backlog, you're going to notice that you're using several different things in creating the product vision. The vision of the product is going to include several pieces. For an example, what is the purpose for creating the product? Which positive changes will this product influence? Under target group, who is impacted by this product? Under needs, what problems are solved? What benefits will it produce? Under the product itself, what is the desired product and what makes this product stand out? Is it feasible to produce this product? What is the product going to benefit the company, or how is it going to benefit the company, and what are the business goals? All of these are pieces of what we need to understand when we're talking about the product vision. Let's focus on the sprints themselves. All right, so what is a sprint? A sprint is a repetitive run from 4 to 8 weeks in length. However, in Scrum, the preference is 4 weeks, no longer than 4 weeks or less. The goal of the sprint is execution. Shorter sprints or iterations are always better, and the longer the sprint, the harder it is to maintain control over the output. The roles associated with Scrum: you're going to have a Scrum Master, a product owner. You're going to have team members, which are part of the development team or product team. And you could have a project manager, but the project manager is not really part of Scrum unless this happens to be a hybrid type of situation. Now, your Scrum Master is focused on the methodology. Your product owner is focused on ranking the features. And then your team members, which will include your development team and or your product team, are focused on doing the work. Your project manager, who is not normally part of Scrum, if there is a project manager, they're functioning on trying to make sure that they remove any kind of roadblocks in keeping that project from running forward. But the project manager in Scrum does not run the project and does not drive the project like they do in traditional project management. Now, Scrum roles that make a difference for us that we want to look at, notice in the center, the product owner, they focus on the product features. Notice the business owner focuses on the organization, the stakeholder, people who must be included, Scrum Master, facilitation is their driver and the methodology. The project manager, if there is a project manager in this hybrid project, they're going to focus on support. And the team members are going to focus on developing and being able to produce the features and functionality. And then if you do use consultants or subject matter experts, they're going to work on specialty items associated with that project. So the Scrum Master, let's understand their role a little bit deeper. They are in charge of facilitating different meetings and promoting Scrum theories, practices, and values. They are not functioning like a project manager, and they should not function like a project manager. He or she facilitates throughout the entire project. They keep the focus on the methodology. He or she is responsible for sprint retrospectives, and the Scrum Masters are servant leaders, and they support the team. So they are not, this is not another name for a project manager. These folks are focused on facilitation. They are focused on methodology. Scrum Master challenges. It's hard to be an observer and not a doer. And many Scrum Masters struggle with this because they want to jump in and do, or they want to jump in and tell people how to solve this problem. Different priorities for the Scrum Master compared to the product owner or to the team. And authority and control are absent from the Scrum Master role. They don't have authority, they don't have control. They are a servant leader who's there to facilitate and drive the methodology. Sometimes it gets into an us versus them mentality, which can happen with this. And that's not what you're wanting to have happen when you're talking about this with the project. You're wanting the Scrum Master to be very much part of that team, but they are not really doing the work. They're just driving the methodology. Selecting a Scrum Master could be a challenge in some organizations. The Scrum Master must be a person who has special skills to assist the team and product owner with success. They need to be able to analyze problems and create solutions, such as problem solving is a central activity for any Scrum Master. They need to have a commitment to the project and to the Scrum process. The availability to work on the project has to be there because they're facilitating. And once again, they're verifying that people did what they were supposed to do in having their daily stand-ups and that they're following the methodology. They also need to have that element of being a servant leader, that servant leadership style, listening, empathy, facilitation, willingness to share the power and authority to other team members. Servant leadership supports the team and allows them to make decisions. And so all of these are components of the Scrum Master, but they are doing it without authority and without power. Now, the main Scrum Master responsibilities that they're going to be involved in on a day-to-day basis is coaching, mentoring, training, process authority, servant leader, trying to remove the roadblocks, change agent. All of these are part of the things they're going to be doing. But notice that they're not functioning like a project manager. They're not accountable for the project. The team's accountable for the project. And it's not another name for project manager. So it is a distinct role here. The product owner focuses on delivering the prioritized features and functionality for the customer. Remember, the product owner is the one who's in charge of the features and functionality. The product owner verbalizes the requirements on behalf of the customer. They verify that each feature brings value as described by the customer in the business case. So the product owner is making sure that they re-rank the features and functionality, and they do that per sprint. And so they re-rank that, and that way the team is always going to be working on the most important features at all time. Selecting the product owner is a person, not a team or committee. Sometimes you'll find organizations, they have a team of people to select the features and functionality. That's not at all what should be happening. The focus is a focus on the product, its features, how the product will function. They regroom the features. That's another term for re-ranking those features. They regroom the features based on priority for the customer. They oversee the product backlog. They understand the stakeholders' goals, objectives, and vision for the project. So the product owner is focused on the features and on providing value to that customer. That's their main thing. Your team members which could be your development or product team. The teams are responsible for completing the work. The team members do not wait for orders from project managers or executive team before completing the work. They are self-organizing and empowered. Their main goal is to drive that project forward, complete that project, execute. They're not asking for permission. Each team is considered to be cross-functional and possess the skills necessary to complete the project. So this is a high-functioning, self-organizing team would be the preference for Scrum. Team members such as developer product team challenges, the project manager is not accountable for the project. If there is a project manager, the team is accountable because they're the ones doing the estimates, making the commitments, and driving the project forward. The team members are accountable for the completion of the project, and the team is normally going to be anywhere from 3 to 9 people, but most of them will be like 4 to 7 people. And so teams can be larger if needed, but the goal is agility, speed, not bureaucracy. The bigger the team, the more bureaucracy that's going to be associated with this project. So we've got to make very sure that what's happening here is that we've got this team as agile as possible for making decisions. Selecting team members for this. Not everybody can be good on a self-organizing Scrum team. So the Scrum team must be willing to make decisions, be accountable for the work they agree to provide. The team must understand the technical and management aspects of all aspects of work. But the team has to be willing to take responsibility and to execute the project without having to ask permission for everything. If a person on the team feels like they've got to have permission all the way through, or someone has to spoon feed them the answer, that's not going to be a good team member for this. The product backlog itself. The product backlog is the master list of features, a group of features, functionality, or requirements for the software or product. Each feature from the product backlog is completed in the order of its priority as determined by the product owner. These features can be reprioritized after each sprint, but that is the role and responsibility of the product owner. They're going to be regrooming these features, and then they're going to be handing off and working with the development team on what is going to go into the sprint backlog to be released in the next sprint. So the product owner controls the features, but not the estimate. The product owner controls the feature, but not the estimate. The development team or the project team, they control the estimate. So they determine what the estimate is. The product owner determines what the ranking order of those features will be. Now, product backlog items. You'll notice here that you've got red, you've got green, yellow, and red. And so the green is going to be the product backlog or the features that are going to be used in this next sprint. Then you'll notice these are high priority features and functionality, and the team is going to use as many of these as they can in the next sprint. Then you'll notice that the medium, the yellow, these are features and functionality that are lower priority right now. Of course, then you also have red, which is going to be the low priority features and functionality. And so you might or might not ever get to those because they are so low priority. You also might see that you've got a sprint backlog. And so that's going to be for that next sprint. That's the features that's just going to be produced in the next sprint. Then after you start that sprint, you will have 15 minutes, a daily scrum. The team gets in a circle normally, and they will share what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, and what kind of struggles they have had. Then you will also have only 30 days to complete that sprint in most cases. And at the end of this, you will have finished features or a product that you're handing off, or a part of a product you're handing off to the customer to begin using and giving you feedback. And then that sprint review or demo is done right before you hand off that product. And so the purpose for that sprint review is so that the team and the customer can look at this to see whether or not this feature is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, all of this is driven by a very common definition in understanding what the scope of the sprints are supposed to be. And it's something called the definition of done. How do we know we are done or finished with that sprint? So the team, along with the product owner, have a good understanding of what this is. So when we talk about the definition of done, the definition of done focuses on criteria for completing a sprint. It passed the team review. It aligns with all the test cases. It's like 90% on unit tests, past regression tests, technical documentation's updated, and quality assurance tests are verified. So all of these pieces here are what we're looking at and defining for the definition of done for that project. Scrum events and ceremonies. Events and ceremonies are two terms that's used for different aspects of the project progress and project process as you go through. So when we talk about events and ceremonies, we're talking about the sprint, we're talking about sprint planning, sprint review meetings, daily stand-up meetings, retrospective meetings. When we talk about a sprint and an iteration is the same thing. So it's a period where prioritized backlog items are turned into products, software, or workable features. The sprint features are controlled by the product owner, who selects the features for completion, which supports the sprint goals. So when we're talking about a sprint, we're really talking about a time of 1 to 4 weeks. Now, the reason why we're saying 1 to 4, 4 should be the longest, but what you'll notice is that if it's just a few features or if it happens to be right at the end of a project, then you're going to have shorter times than the 4 weeks. The sprint process, if you look at this, will follow this cycle here. So you have sprint planning, sprint backlog, daily Scrum report metrics, demonstrate done, reviewable work. You'll have integration, sprint review, retrospective, and then updated release and strategy. Now, you might not use every one of these in every single sprint, but these are components that people will use as they're double checking and making sure that the sprint is producing the level of quality and meeting that definition of done. In sprint planning, it involves planning with the product owner. The product owner determines how many features, user stories, or story points to produce in the current sprint. Now, features, we've talked about. User stories is how we're going to interact with technology. And so if you're working on a technology project, user stories are normally a component of how we're going to interact with that technology. And then a story point happens to be a fictitious measurement that is used in the technology world. And so the team decides what a story point is worth and how much that measurement is going to count when you are starting to use this. And then for sprint planning extracts the stories or features from the epic of a project. Now, a comparison of stories, sprint, and release kind of runs like this. The releases can have multiple sprints, sprints can have multiple stories, and stories connect how people interact with the technology. So we might have a lot of stories in that one sprint, and we have several sprints to be able to be part of that release. Stories have numerous tasks to be completed for the software or product. Stories are prioritized by the product owner and for completion. Each story is prioritized based on the value, the risk or uncertainty, the sequence or dependency, and the estimate itself. Scrum artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, the release backlog, and the release itself. So the product backlog is characterized by Roman Pitcher as having 4 main qualities. He says that it's detailed for high priority requirements and features. He says it's estimated using story points or ideal days to make sure the duration is understood by everyone. He says it's also emergent. It focuses on the ever-changing items in the backlog, which means reprioritization and removal of some features due to substitution of others more important. And he said, and it also focuses on prioritization of all features is a continuous effort, which is called grooming in the most Scrum literature. The sprint backlog focuses on reaching the sprint goal, what features, functionality, or outputs are needed for this sprint. to be considered complete or done. And the sprint backlog and the product backlog are normally considered to be two separate items. And the reason is because the product backlog is the master list and the sprint backlog happens to be the smaller list that's going to be completed in the next sprint. So the product owner is responsible for grooming the backlogs and prioritizing them prior to the sprint, so team members understand what should be accomplished. So each sprint should have a certain number of features and functionality underneath each of these. And so that's what we have listed here for you under the sprint backlog. And so what we do is we understand what should be completed for that sprint, which should be end up being a releasable feature to that customer for them to begin using. Even though it doesn't have all of the features and all the functionality, they still have something. So the product owner is responsible for creating the sprint backlog prior to the ending of the previous sprint. Then you look at the release backlog. Some individuals do not separate a release backlog from the release plan. Many experts think this creates additional work that's not necessary. The release plan is presented by the product owner as potential rollouts of the various stages or aspects of a release for customer use. Now, when we're talking about the release plan, giving you all of these rollouts that's going to go to the customer for use, sometimes you'll see upper management who does not understand Scrum and they want to lock this in. That is not the purpose of a release plan. These dates are not locked in. These are high level. This is a live document. So these dates are going to evolve and continue to change and adjust. The release plan shows the overall releases of the product or features throughout the project for customer use. It should not be treated as hard or mandated timeframes, but as a summary or overview of projected releases based on the current priorities. Each day you'll have a daily scrum. We talked about this for 15 minutes a day. So the definition of a daily scrum, it's a 15-minute meeting held every morning, no longer than 15 minutes. Every time you start talking about problems, sometimes people want to expand this. This should never be expanded. So 15 minutes, hold that time period solid so it doesn't change. It can be held early or late in the day, but it does need to be held at the same time each day so everyone understands what's happening with this. You need to start and end on time, prevent anyone from pushing the meeting beyond the time frame. If it needs to have additional conversations about something, push it offline for a totally different meeting. Now, the questions for the daily scrum is what was accomplished since the last daily scrum, which would have been yesterday. What are you going to do today until the next scrum, which is going to be tomorrow? And what problems or challenges are standing in your way? These are the three questions everyone should be talking about. Extra stuff should not be part of this meeting. Now, what you're looking at here, this is called a burn up chart. You actually have two charts here. You have a burn up and a burn down chart. It's important for you to be able to understand this because these are very common measuring sticks in Scrum. And so when we talk about a burn up chart, burning up the story points or user stories. Normally when you see a burn up chart, it will start at 0 and it will show how many story points or how many user stories you have completed. And you'll notice at the top here, there's 200 is what you're trying to complete for this project. So it's showing how many you have completed until you get to 200. It's called a burn up chart. But you also might see what's called a burn down chart. You'll notice on the burn down chart, it's the exact opposite. It shows that there are 200 features that we are trying to put into this project, and it's showing how many features are left until you finish this project. Now, this is making the assumption that you're not going to be adding additional features as you go along in the project, and that happens quite often in an Agile type project. Now, what do you do when sustainable pace is not working? Now, one of the goals in any type of Agile project is for you to have a sustainable pace of 4 weeks before you produce some feature or functionality. But if you're having problems with sustainable pace, what's happening? So if it's not working, everyone discusses it in the team. You problem solve where the gaps or the bottlenecks are with the pace. You discuss the challenges which might have been overlooked in the pace. You create a new plan or process and try it out on an iteration or two to see if that takes care of that pace. And you verify there's enough authority and power given to the various roles to support the speed. If we are having to check and get permission on anything, if we're having to check with someone else, if there's some kind of bottleneck that keeps bogging us down, then all of this is just wasted time until you get those gaps or that bottleneck fixed or get the authority into that team meeting. Sprint reviews. A sprint review is defined as it allows the stakeholders to verify the demo features or functionality work as promised. It's conducted after the work on the sprint finishes. So you finish the sprint, and then you're going to do your sprint review so that we can check and make sure that it's doing what we said it was going to do. You identify the sprint review or the sprint demo. It could include seeking feedback from the stakeholders based on the current progress. This means gaining information on features which were eliminated because of their difficulty in the current sprint. So that feedback is going to make a difference because that's going to go into your next sprint and make a difference on what you do. Then the Scrum Retrospectives. This is like a lessons learned in traditional project management. So at the end of each Scrum, you're going to do a retrospective. And then at the end of the actual project, you're going to do a retrospective on the project overall. So when we talk about retrospectives, it should be conducted at the end of each sprint or iteration and at the end of the project. Retrospectives conducted at the end of a sprint or iteration allows continuous learning for the team. This learning can be passed on to other team members, which will adjust the estimates, risk, and processes associated with the project. Retrospectives at the end of the project, we'll examine the project overall and make recommendations in adjusting processes to run Scrum and Agile projects at a faster rate. So this retrospective should not be something that is just bypassed. It should be something that is utilized in every one of the sprints and then at the end of the Scrum project for sure. And the reason is so that we can learn from this, change things, and be able to run at maximum speed with this project. Now, there's two types of retrospectives. One is at the end of the sprint, and one is at the end of the project. Both of these have value, but the end of the sprint is focused on one sprint, a 4-week period of time. The end of the project is drawing from all of the sprints and trying to make changes to the framework of Scrum in the future. Now, as we come to our last slide here with sprints and retrospectives, and so if we show you 3 sprints, and so in between each of these sprints, you would have a retrospective. And so it would be very important for you to be able to gain knowledge from this. Now, as I close out here, let me talk to you just a moment about a 3-day Scrum course that we have developed. We've developed a 3-day Scrum course to lay the foundation for people so that they can understand how to use Scrum in their organization. This course will start from just laying basic foundation, if you know nothing about Scrum, all the way through to the end to where we will finish out talking about and giving information about retrospectives. So this 3-day intensive course is something that will lay the foundation, will allow organizations to be able to kind of get their information wet on what's happening with Scrum and whether or not Scrum could be utilized, at least in a hybrid way, to be able to benefit them in some way. Also, let me mention to you that we have already listed all of our boot camps for next year that are going to be virtual. And so we've already jumped through the hoops. We're an authorized training partner with PMI. We've already gone to the training to be trained as one of their PMP instructors. And we've already been training people in the boot camps with their new material. So let me encourage you that if you have not gotten your PMP, take a look at the schedule and see about getting into one of our live instructor-led virtual courses and be part of getting the PMP behind you. Let me thank you so much for being part of this class and being part of this webinar this morning. I don't want to take it for granted that you invest an hour a month being part of this. And so thank you so much for being willing to spend an hour with me each month and be able to pick up some of these key ideas and key things that we try to teach you. And thank you for being interested in Scrum as a possibility for something that might help you in your project. So listen, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful week. God bless you. Stay safe. Bye now.